Ladies and gentlemen, yesterday we did a video in which we said maybe the ANC should lose the election deliberately. Allow it to be in opposition for the next 5 years and blame the DA for everything. Well, now the DA has come out with a new speech on what its first 100 days in office would look like.
And ironically enough, the DA's blueprint for South Africa is actually pretty good. It's sensible, it's reasonable, and it's very boring. So it makes it very sort of DA. So together, we're going to go through it today in this particular order. And there's really 4 things they want to do. They want to fix Parliament itself as an institution. They want to end load shedding by embracing privatization. They want to abolish cadre deployment in favor of merit-based appointments. And on top of that, they want to halve the crime rates. And then they want to grow the economy while protecting social grants. So let's go through all 5 of these things. So Byron, the institution of Parliament, well, I mean, it's burned down, sort of literally. But also, it's been burnt down figuratively because it's just been a rubber stamping exercise for the ANC for the past 30 years. It's not there to have any oversight of the executive. The DA wants to change that, apparently.
Yeah, so what the DA actually wants to do is hold the ministers to account. I mean, in Retard Understand, we don't hold our ministers to account. They just do whatever they want. When they're even asked by Parliament to provide reports on what's actually happening in terms of their ministerial portfolio, it's quite frequent that the ministers do not provide said reports and actually ignore the questions. If you actually go back in Parliament's Hansard and you look at all the number of times that basically a minister has delivered a report late, or in many instances not delivered a report at all, yeah, it's basically all the time. It's just a common occurrence. So what the DA proposes doing is actually allowing Parliament to fine a minister where they and that's fine the minister personally in their personal capacity where they fail to produce a report on time.
Yeah, and the DA is like the Karen of South Africa. So, reports are very important. Can speak to the manager, minister is very important. But I think, essentially having a parliament that works for the people, as the DA calls it, it's a fair thing to do, a fair thing to want to achieve. And I think, yeah, a good idea in general. What about this notion of sort of ending load shedding by privatization? I thought that's what the ANC were doing anyway, with IPPs.
That's what I thought the ANC were doing as well. But I think what they're saying is they want to create an independent company that's responsible for transmission, and that company would actually be private in itself. So it wouldn't be a state-owned enterprise such as Eskom. And what they would then do is be able to engage in almost direct selling to the public sector. Yeah, I can already hear all the cries of foul from all the socialist wannabes in the country, basically saying how, energy should be a public good. But what the DA proposes is that if you have a degree of private selling of electricity en masse, then we wouldn't have load shedding. Whether or not that's true, I don't know. I wouldn't want to say. But I mean, obviously, the biggest difficulty is you're still going to have the transmission lines. Otherwise, how else is electricity transmitted? So it makes sense to have that publicly owned. But the DA doesn't seem to think so. At least it's not as far as I understand it.
That remains to be seen, but they also want to give a 75,000 Rand rebate for, solar energy on people's roofs, which we agree with. That's about half the price of a fairly good system these days. So neither here nor there, but pretty good. My system costs much more than that. But, if I had 75 grand from the government, I would maybe have put on an even better system. So that's the upside.
Yeah, so the government currently has a tax rebate, but it's up to 15 grand. I mean, they didn't tell you that, but I know because I work in the sector. So 15 grand on a solar unit gets you 2 panels, and it's basically a tax rebate on the VAT. So it's a waste of time. Doesn't cover any forms of inverters or batteries or anything like that. What the DA proposes is that they would give up to 75,000 to individuals to encourage them to install full units. It's fair enough. I don't think 75 gets you that big a unit, though. I mean, it's a nice contribution, but it's, it's better than 15 grand.
Well, I think for the majority of South Africans who are stuck with load shedding on a daily basis, I think it's a wonderful thing. Us rich people, we want more. But for average schmo, the 3 kilowatt inverter and a 5 kilowatt battery is 10 times better than what they have at the moment. So kudos to them. Within 100 days, the DA said they're going to introduce legislation that outlaws cadre deployment. and they instead are going to not have cadet deployment. They're going to have merit-based civil service, which is all fine and well, and something that you agree to in theory. How on earth are you going to dislodge the existing deep state that the ANC has created through cadet deployment? We don't really know yet. The DA isn't allowing us to see into those particular details. We agree with the theory, but it's going to come through with the action, and the action is going to be a lot more than just passing legislation. It's going to require quite a lot of coercion.
Yeah, I think people actually grossly underestimate just how strict the labor law is. So if you actually look at Ramaphosa, many times he doesn't go out there and actually hold some of his executive or even the people that work under them to account. And part of the reasons for that is because of labor unions and the labor law itself. So it's actually not that easy just to fire people because of you have CCMA risks and, the labor union risk of them coming to burn your place down, which they seem to love to do. It's a hobby in Retardistan. But at the end of the day, that is almost there deliberately to protect the cadres that have been empowered. Now, it's all going to fun changing your government ministers. It's all going to fun to changing the executive, but you need to be able to change the deep state. The deep state's already compromised. So how exactly the DA will tackle the deep state and actually change all the civil servants, for want of a better word, I don't know, unless they actually have substantial labor reforms, which I'm sure would be welcome, but they don't talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me like the best option is to reverse 4 and 5. So number 5 is, to make half the violent crime rate. But what you should do is bolster the police, make it very loyal to the state, and then you cut jobs in the civil service so that inevitably when they start trying to burn state institutions, the police are there to give them a clap. That makes more sense to me.
Yeah, you say that, but I mean, their ideas behind policing is to make local policing stronger, which is through, competent employment. They literally say that it's just through competent employment. Mate, I don't think all of SAPS's problems are due to competence. I mean, they're severely under budget. The government doesn't pay its bills. Most of the police vans and SAPs don't get service because no garage wants to touch them because they don't get paid. So I don't think it's as straightforward as just employ a local bobby and you'll be fine. Their other idea, though, is to create a Scorpions 2.0, which they would have as a Chapter 9 institution and enshrined in the Constitution. So it couldn't just be abolished by, Jacob Zuma when they went after him. Yeah, that's great. But I don't know about you, Ramon, but I kind of feel like the ship of where the Scorpions could have been useful kind of gone. Yeah, okay, cool. Get a new one, but kind of feel like, to me personally, you probably should have had this 10 years ago, and having it now is a little bit like building the fire station after the house burnt down.
Yeah, perhaps you're correct to some degree. I mean, the Scorpions was really there to sort of crack down on state corruption for the most part, which is why they got rid of it. So, yeah, I mean, if the DA or the multi-party charter, whatever it's called, actually win this election, having the Scorpions 2.0 could be useful to go after the previous ANC guys who ruined this country. But what I don't like about the blueprint around crime is about it's devolving police, it's making police better, it's having competent, well-trained police officers. What about gun control, guys? What about giving powers to private security that allows them to arrest people? Like what about those small, low-hanging fruits? Ease gun control dramatically, allow private security to have the same powers as police. All those things are much easier to implement. You got already 600,000 security guards around this country. A lot of people are fearing for their lives, so they have illegal guns. I mean, just make all of that legal, make security guards almost like police officers in terms of powers, and then you're already solving a lot of issues with crime right there. Solving police and devolving police is like a 5-year strategy, but we need to solve crime now through easy means. And my ideas are easy.
Yeah, I mean, easing gun control, making it easier for the individual to get a gun to protect themselves would actually be a good step. Also going out there, as you rightly say, and empowering private security to do more of the job that the police do, actually, you're right, would have a massive impact. And we know that the private sector is fully staffed. So you wouldn't have to wait X amount of years until you actually have your police officers, your security officers on the road. They'd be available from day one. And I'm pretty sure if you had it as like a new Syrah grade or something, I'm sure that a lot of the private security companies would jump at the opportunity. So it's a good idea. But what do you think of this idea that they want to table a new budget that creates jobs and protects social grants?
So essentially what it means is they want to create a new budget. Once they are in power, within the first 100 days, they have a new budget. They want to stop all bailouts of state-owned enterprises, and they're going to kill all of the job-killing policies of the ANC, like expropriation, like compensation, the NHI, and things like that. But interestingly, on the NHI, they do say that what they want to do is send the bill back to Parliament. They don't want to can the bill. There's a big difference between the two. NHI on its own is a bullshit idea. You don't send it back to Parliament to debate it more. You kill it. And the DA says, no, we'll send it back. That's a concern for me.
Yeah, so the DA basically says send it back to Parliament because there's clauses in it which are unconstitutional. So noticeably, the clauses that frequently get cited as being unconstitutional is the fact that you would basically outlawed private medical aids. So the actual constitutional element that it has there is the freedom of choice. And the other one is the needs certificate, where the government can basically tell you where you have to work and what job you have to do. And people say that that's a violation of the ability to choose your profession and your rights of work. So those are the two major clauses that people highlight. But obviously, the clauses that the rest of us with the brain cell highlight is that you don't really want a centralized fund because it's open to corruption. State capture, for example. The other thing you really don't really want is you don't want this centralized fund, if you will. The thing has to be funded, well, through tax. So basically you have to have a PAYE increase or a NHR separate division where you get taxed for your NHR. I mean, those are budgetary constraints and we don't have the money. And one of the things that has been highlighted about the bill is that there's been no costing of it. Many times this has been highlighted.
Yeah. And in terms of other budgets, in terms of like protecting social grants, I think they have to use that because the ANC keeps saying if the whites get into power, your social grants is over and therefore, apartheid is back or something like that. So essentially what they're trying to say is we can have a growing economy and the growing economy will contribute more to social grant and welfare because that's a stopgap between a growing economy and creating jobs. Those people are still going to be jobless for a while, so social grants will continue. I think that's fair. I think social grants to a large degree do help. I also think that the black market or the township economy helps even more. It's like 700 billion rands worth of economic activity that the state never sees. That has created far more opportunities than social grants, in my personal opinion. But I think the DA had to put it on there that social grants will be here to stay, just in case, people think apartheid is back should the DA win. So, I mean, overall, Byron, my thoughts are reasonable, predictable, boring, 6 out of 10. Like, you can't be against something like this, but it's not something that sets my world on fire.
No, I suppose what would have probably set my world on fire was, liberalizing First and Second Amendment type things, going out there and canning NHI and sacking half the state and, check all this, like getting rid of half the departments and canning most of the legislation. And, that would have been a massive change. But what we are actually seeing in this budget, or this speech, if you will, apparently this forms the DA's persona. They said that this year they're not going to talk about what Ramaphosa says. They're just going to do this instead because they seem to think they're going to be in government after the elections. But what this kind of shows is that what they're going to do for the large degree is kind of do what the ANC does, just slightly better. And maybe the things that the ANC are doing that are really dumb, they're going to can that. But on the whole, it's going to be like kind of like a light version of the ANC, at least from where I'm set. I'm sure that they would disagree with me entirely. But yeah, I mean, it's good, but it's like, so what? Fix parliament, end load shedding, stop cater deployment, improve crime, at least crime prevention, and grow the economy. Sounds like a Cyril saying it, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, there's no bullet trains or, smart cities, but this is basically trying to make Retail Danistan slightly less retarded. It's not trying to, kill Retail Danistan. It just makes it less retarded than it could be, which maybe is what we need. I don't know. Maybe it's what the country needs. Who knows? So when we said yesterday the ANC should lose on purpose to regain power in 5 years, with this blueprint, could they regain power in 5 years?
Good question. Let us know in the comment section below. What do you think?